Greetings, fellow Empyreans. I am Ashtarothi, and it is February 20th, YC126, and we have some news and updates. I must admit, it has been kind of a quiet year so far. YC126 hasn't seen any serious updates. Vanguard is not nearly as far along as some of us had hoped, so obviously that rollout is going to be much slower than we may have thought. We have gotten some updates in the director's letter previously, but not so much as far as updates to the game so far this year until today. The CSM Summit just wrapped up. For those of you who do not know, the CSM is an elected body of players that are flown out to Iceland in order to have an annual summit where they get to talk to all of the top brass and main designers and developers of EVE Online and express their concerns and also see kind of what CCP's plans are, a little bit of a peek behind the curtain, so that way they can give their thoughts and feedback as representatives of their community. I've done plenty of CSM videos. You can go check them out on your own time if you want. In the meantime, though, there's often a question about what kind of things were talked about during the CSM meetings, whether or not these things have any impact. And here we see immediate impact. We're getting a large list of balances and other things that have already come. If you are hearing this, that means it is live on Tranquility. We got a dev blog and patch notes, as well as, of course, on Hobo Leaks, we have all of the differences that were patched into the game today. We'll be looking into all of that in order to understand what all happened, because it has some interesting implications. There's some meta changing stuff, and there's one feature that I think it's a huge deal in just the usability of the game. So without further ado, let's jump into it. Loyal Capsuleers, New Eden is constantly in motion, ever-evolving, impacted by corruption and suppression, and subjected to the havoc wrought in space and on the ground. A new update sees an influx of strategic enhancements, focusing on enriched faction warfare experience, quality of life improvements, and the much-requested return of the loyalty point donation. Many of the changes being implemented are in fact direct response to community requests, specifically proposals for ship rebalancing via the Council of Stellar Management, which recently concluded its annual summit in Reykjavik. Cooperation within corporations is a cornerstone of EVE Online, and the return of LP donations is a key step towards further fostering this vital aspect of gameplay. Since LP donations were paused following the release of Havoc expansion for monitoring the new ecosystem, many groups and communities within the Warzone and beyond have expressed a strong need to have this re-enabled sooner rather than later. This was always a really weird one for me, because so LP donations was already relatively new, and they shut it off during Havoc, but then they also still allowed LP taxation. So all of the problems that you would expect with LP donation still happened, where people were able to pull their LP, and the very first Azrael or whatever had to even be pulled because of how it was acquired. And it's just I would like to hear whether or not they feel like they accomplished anything with this LP donation pause. I understand it was brand new. They didn't want to do too many things at the same time, but I'm just glad it's back. The ecosystem will now continue to be monitored, so in anticipation of the potential impact on the economy and to ensure a balanced environment, a future update will introduce a tax system to these transactions. So what that means is, guys, if you want to donate LP, now's the time to do it. Eventually, there's going to be some sort of sink where LP is destroyed in the act of doing those donations, but it's not there yet. So that's an interesting one. That really sucks, because I would have actually liked utility put in, so that way our faction warfare group can buy LP on the regular. Would be nice is to just tie this into the opportunities window, so that way people can just donate their LP. I mean, a tax is fine, but all that's going to mean is that we can offer less ISK per LP. I don't know if I like that at all. This enhancement is part of EVE's ongoing commitment to respond to community feedback and refine their in-game experience, making cooperation not just part of the survival of New Eden, but thriving aspect of rich player-driven narrative. The EVE community has pointed out myriad opportunities for rebalancing through the CSM, and this feedback has been instrumental in the changes implemented in the new update. In the spirit of fostering a more dynamic and competitive faction warfare environment, significant ship rebalances are being introduced to enrich Capsuleer's strategic options in New Eden. The essence of these changes lie in addressing the dominance of certain ships, such as the Executor Navy issue, Osprey Navy issue, and Caracal, which has historically overshadowed their counterparts due to their superior range and damage capabilities. These vessels receive slight adjustments to ensure that they aren't dramatically surpassed by the diversity of valuable ships in their respective classes. Furthermore, the Bellicose and Republic Fleet Firetail received much needed enhancements to affirm their place in the combat ecosystem. We're going to look into the details of this. Let's jump over to the patch notes, actually, to see exactly what this is going to mean for what they're talking about. Let's see. Caracal. Okay, so what we're going to see here is that rapid light missile launchers have been incredibly powerful for some time, especially when combined with their range bonuses. As rebalance of the Cerberus in the Viridian expansion last summer, we intentionally removed the light missile range bonus from the ship. In this balance pass, we're removing all the remaining per-level range bonuses to rapid light missiles to match the precedent set by rapid heavy missiles, which do not increase with Bastion or Spaceship Command skills. This is potentially a big deal. The Caracal, Osprey Navy issue, and Onyx all had a missile velocity bonus that included light missiles. Rapid Lights as a medium weapon system fires a light ammo, and this is something that is unique to missiles and is one of the reasons why missiles are known for being able to apply more effectively. Basically, what it does is it takes the missiles, because in a turret, it's the turret that does the damage. In the missile launcher, it's the missile that does the damage. It's just the missile launcher that gets the missile to the target, basically. The idea here is that you can have a medium weapon that shoots a light missile just really, really fast. And it has a long reload time, but it has this really bursty damage. So that way it does the damage of a medium weapon system, but it firing something that's hitting with the precision of a small weapon system. So, like, for instance, the light missile launcher Caracal has always been really, really good for skirmishing because it's really fast, and so it can, like, dance around a lot of slower things. But those rapid lights, especially as a group, allows them to burst down anything that's fast enough to catch up with them. And all they have to do is dance out of range when they go through their long reload time, and then they can dance back into range and go for another kill or two. So this was a very popular strategy back in the day. It hasn't been as popular recently, but it is definitely a thing. But what they're doing here is making it so that all of these three ships, which were the three remaining ships that had this bonus that allowed light missiles to shoot further, which, remember, light missiles are already the long-range weapon system of the smaller weapons. So they're taking the long-range, small weapon, and they're giving it a boosted range even further, which makes it competitive with things like heavy missiles. And that ends up being a pretty big deal. And so they're getting rid of that. It had already been not part of heavy missiles, rapid heavies, as they're saying. So rip to the... I'll be interested to see if the rapid missile launching Caracal still remains viable, given the fact that it's just a range nerf, but I think that this is going to seriously hurt them, as now they have to get well within the 30-kilometer zone, which is an incredibly dangerous place to be for these kinds of ships. The Osprey Navy issue, definitely, so the Osprey Navy issue has been really good at harassing especially smaller ships with those light missile launchers. I think that this is going to impact the meta the most, like day to day, although the Caracal's a big one. The Onyx, I feel they're mostly just cleaning that up. But, as they're focusing more on nullsec, especially potentially NPC nullsec more, things like Onyxes and stuff will be potentially more valuable, or like being focused on. But either way, the point here is that now rapid missile launchers do not get ship range bonuses. And that's just the way it is. And so this change is more about just establishing that policy. Note that roll bonuses from ships still apply, like the rapid heavy missiles for Mortis Legion ships and combat battlecruisers. So this is not saying that there is no rapid missile launcher bonuses. It's just not a per skill on a specific ship. If there's going to be a bonus like that, it's going to be on a roll bonus applying to all ships. The Executor Navy issue was the least used faction cruiser in the game prior to Uprising. We are happy that we managed to pull it out of the abyss it was in, but it is now the very top of the pile along with the Osprey Navy issue, and it's become incredibly dominant. And so its damage bonus has been reduced from 25% to 20% per level of Gallente cruiser skill, kind of making that extreme damage potential of the Executor Navy issue, bringing it back down a little bit. Probably going to be good. We'll have to see. It was a very popular hull. Maybe we'll see more V&I love again. The Bellicose continues to have low usage as both an E-War platform and combat cruiser. With the changes made to rapid light missiles, we want to make sure that they are a strong Tech 1 option for going all out with medium missiles. That is why we are increasing the speed and power grid output of the Bellicose to help it stand out more against the Caracal as a speedier alternative for shield setups and help enable armor setups. Mass velocity increased from 240 meters per second to 260 meters per second, so almost 10% increase. Power grid output increased from 700 to 780, so over 10% power grid increase. That's great. Now it can have have much more fitting room. This is actually really cool because, of course, the Bellicose, being the Mimitar E-War platform, is going to be good with like target painters, so allow those medium missiles to apply better than the rapid lights. And the Republic Fleet Firetail, prior to Uprising, all 4 Navy combat frigates had similar usage, with the Firetail slightly trailing. Post Uprising, the other 3 ships have increased in usage considerably, but the Firetail has been left behind. We are adding a smaller fall-off bonus to help boost the Firetail's versatility, especially for autocannon setups. New bonus added, 5% bonus to small projectile fall-off per level of Mimitar frigate skill. So this is just tacked on to everything else. It's a big deal. I think it's going to be really good. And I think that it matches the Rifter bonus. So we're going to see potentially a really good fast kiting platform. That idea of the fast kiter being moved a lot from Caldari to Mimitar. This is the Nerf Caldari buff Mimitar patch. Furthermore, throughout the cluster, nuanced adjustments are being introduced to refine the PvP experience, particularly for veteran pilots. These tweaks, grounded in player input, aim to subtly enhance the strategic diversity and balance of ship performance, making engagements more dynamic without drastically altering the established combat landscape. Marauders will experience a minor reduction in warp speed, a change designed to subtly affect its battlefield mobility. This adjustment opens up new tactical opportunities for adversaries, potentially allowing for a more strategic isolation of Marauders in conflict scenarios. If we look at the patch notes, we can see that Marauders, while we are happy on having on-grid power of Marauders since the adjustments were made in the Viridian expansion, Marauders can still feel oppressive in certain scenarios. Marauders currently only warp at 12.5% slower than T1, Faction, and T3 cruisers, which doesn't leave much room for them to outmaneuver Marauders when choosing to avoid them. It also doesn't give players much reason to choose smaller hulls over a Marauder when travel time is a consideration for PvP and PvE. To tackle this, we're reducing the warp speed of Marauders down to the same base level of T1 and Faction battleships. Now, this sounds like it could be really bad, and it sucks, it goes from 3.5 to 3 AU, whatever. It is worth noting that, Marauders have always been really, really good at aligning, unusually good at aligning. So they are, very agile battleships in general. So, this feels like Marauders got a huge buff, right? Marauders got this... You do double the damage and you're crazy and everybody likes you and, whatever. And then since then, they've tried to chip everything away from the Marauder that isn't that core concept, isn't the thing that makes Marauders really, really liked, but still makes Marauders have a good feeling spot in the overall ecosystem of the game. And I can respect that. I see that this is a very challenging thing, and they continue to kind of apply Achilles heels or make sure that the Marauder is good at what it's good at and bad at what it's bad at. And one of the things it is bad at is maneuvering outside of its micro jump drive. So, okay. Or one of the things it could be bad at, I guess. It is known for being bad because it bastions itself, right? But obviously, Marauders aren't even used in Bastion all the time. In the realm of command ships, enhancements focus on fostering a balanced distribution of roles and effectiveness. A modest increase in the range of command bursts by 50% is introduced to improve the operational flexibility in fleet settings, enhancing their support capabilities without overshadowing other fleet components. The Nighthawk and Astarte receive slight modifications to promote balance and encourage diversity in PvP situations. Okay, so command ships are, of course, one of my favorite types of ships, so this is, I guess that's my bias, but what we see in the patch notes is a 50% roll bonus for all command burst range to field command subgroups, so that's Absolution, Nighthawk, Astarte, and Sleipnir. What does this mean in practice? Well, the other 4 command ships have 100% range boosts, right? So when they rebalanced the command ships, they made it so that one of the command ships was more of a fleet command ship, so it had big wide boosts, but a little bit weaker. And then the other one was a more selfish booster, where it had very small range boosts, but they were much stronger, or at least they were stronger, right? So the Absolution, the Nighthawk, Astarte, and the Sleipnir are those selfish, skirmishy ones, right? Now, what's weird about this is that the 50% roll bonus to command burst is something that standard battlecruiser have. So up until now, basic T1 battlecruiser had a bigger burst range, just weaker boosts than these field command ships. So really all they're doing is making it so that you no longer have to give up range for your command burst to step up into these more skirmishy command burst subgroups, which I think is really good. That's fair. That's fine. I love command ships. I hope to use them more. The Astarte is currently the least used command ship, and it struggles to compete with the cheaper Brutix Navy issue hull. We've boosted the Deimos in an earlier balance pass, which made the extra ISK cost for upshifting into the Astarte hull not feel as worthwhile as it once was. To help address this, we're giving the Astarte a small bump in rep power to help it stand out more as a tankier alternative to the Brutix Navy issue. The armor repair bonus goes up to 10% per level of Gallente battlecruiser skill. Man, I don't know how I feel about this. Like, the EOS, like the rep bonus is being pulled off of the EOS, and now it's like being even more on here. I guess I get it. It's the skirmishy one, whatever. I don't get it, actually. I don't. The thing about the Astarte is that the reason why it's the least used is because it's got the hardest to apply. Blasters are too easy to kite away from. The Absolution can do amazing amounts of damage at pretty good projection range. The Nighthawk can do amazing damage, well, could, spoiler. But the Astarte always has had problems like applying their damage, and like the hybrids, and I don't know if I thought to myself that the Astarte needed to be more tanky, and I also don't see how a rep bonus makes the Astarte compete better with the Deimos, although obviously that does give really good synergy to their command burst, because if they have a rep command burst, that just makes it even better. So there is that. The Nighthawk. Because the Nighthawk is overperforming in wormhole space and becoming oppressive, we are toning it down its damage by lowering the rate of fire bonus, but partially compensating it by increasing the kinetic damage bonus. Our aim here is to slightly lower the Nighthawk's damage output and shift it to more to kinetic, so players have more options to counter them outside of firewalls, such as fitting kinetic hardeners, reactive hardeners, and bringing Tech 2 Gallente ships. So the rate of fire bonus for heavy and heavy assault missiles have been reduced from 10% to 7.5% per level of command ship skills, and the kinetic damage has been increased from 7.5% to 10% per level. Now, because the rate of fire bonus has been reduced, that means the total amount of damage has been reduced, and so this increase is an increase of a reduced amount. I want to believe that that's how it works. So it actually ends up with an overall lower value. I might need to check my math on that, but it's certainly not a buff. But what this really is doing is pushing the Nighthawk into being more kinetic locked. Which broadly, I would like to say that this was, nerf to Caldari ships, buffs to Mimitar ships. Entropic disintegrators synonymous with Triglavian Might are adjusted to offer a more measured performance. The initial damage output is slightly reduced with a compensatory increase to damage ramp up per cycle. Now this one is big, and it has a lot of people pretty nervous, but I'm curious as to what its practical application is going to be. Basically, the short of it is that with Triglavian weapons, it used to be that the Triglavians have a starting output, and then it goes to 1.5 times above, so a total of 2.5 times the starting damage output for its end goal, with a ramp of 5%. So if you think about it, so after 30 cycles, it's now doing its absolute top damage of 250% of its starting damage. What they've done is they've reduced that starting damage by 20%. They've cut 20% off of the multipliers of all of the guns, of all of the entropic disintegrator weapons, except for the super title which is the big one, the Zenitra's weapon, but its base damage, its damage multiplier was reduced by 20%. However, its ramp has been increased by 2%, so it's gone from 5% to 7% damage multiplier per cycle, and its maximum ramp is now 3.125 times, so 312.5% of its initial damage. What does this mean in practice? What this means is that its initial damage is going to be lower, its ramp damage per cycle is going to be higher, and therefore in the same amount of time it will end up at the same amount of DPS. That's what that means. What they're saying here is that they're hoping that this is going to make it so that it doesn't necessarily allow them to kill tackle as fast or whatever. But here's the thing about that. People always talk about the low damage of these ships, and the thing about the Triglavian ships has always been that they also have really, really good application. And when you're talking about these smaller ships that are relying on their signature and all this stuff in order to reduce the incoming damage, the raw damage isn't necessarily what matters as much as how much of that raw damage can actually be applied. So I wonder whether or not this is going to have that big of a change. I know that we have the Triglavian, like the Abyssal Runner community has been kind of looking into this. The other big one is that in a lot of situations when destroyers end up being one of the best ships to use for a thing, we end up with the Kiki outperforming most other destroyers in a way that isn't actually that great as far as things go. It's weird that the Kiki could often have as big of an initial DPS as some destroyers or a competitive amount of DPS. So bringing down the Kiki's initial DPS is actually probably pretty good too. This doesn't do much against like Nurgle pilots and Ikitursas. They usually rely on their high ramps. By the time you get 2 or 3 cycles in, you're already now in a better shape than you were before. So, that's fine. The Mimesis implant set Nurgle will have a small damage increase to max spool. We're also increasing the damage multiplier per cycle, so it'll take around 30 cycles of the weapon to reach match rank. So it'll still take around. So it takes about the same amount of time to do about the same amount of damage. This will also help other alternatives that fill the same role and stand out more in case of the Omen Navy issue versus the Vedmak. That's a very fair point. The Omen Navy issue should have more point damage with application, and the Vedmak is just really, really, really good at that. I don't know whether or not I'd say that the Omen Navy issue was worse than the Vedmak at it, but maybe they have the numbers better than I do. And with the Omen Navy issue now offering much better initial DPS, than the Vedmak. The Vedmak's going to be a threat if he can stay on you more than a few cycles, which is actually good, right? Like, it means that, like, once you start getting burned by a Vedmak, you've got a few seconds to figure out what you want to do about it. The Triglavian AT ships have also been adjusted. I mean, this doesn't really apply to us too much, but basically they're just adjusted to make it so that they reach their max ramp in 20 cycles instead of 30. That's all. So next, the recent enhancements to the Excel spreadsheet add-in empowers players with even more advanced tools. These updates, including intuitive search functions for structures and stations, as well as comprehensive insights to market dynamics, are designed to optimize data-driven decision-making in EVE Online. Detailed patch notes and discussions can be found at EVE Online forums. To facilitate a seamless integration of these new features, a sample worksheet is available, providing a practical starting point for data-hungry capsuleers to leverage full potential in Excel to add on. I really like the sample worksheet. I think it's a really good thing. People should probably check it out if you can. Maybe I'll dig into this more another time as a whole nother thing. I haven't really dug too much into the EVE Excel add-on. One thing that I'd be more happy about the EVE Excel add-on if the API wasn't as abandoned as it is. And I guess that's just what I'm going to say about that. We're going to move on. EVE Online continues to evolve with a focus on ensuring the journey to New Eden is constantly improving with balance adjustments, quality of life improvements, and player enhanced alterations. The sandbox keeps expanding. The sky is not the limit, merely the beginning. All right, jumping back to the patch notes, we can see that there's a few things that they might have missed. The closest forward operating base with Zarzak will now appear in the loyalty point section of the wallet. Yeah, that's just kind of correction. Now, here we go. It's now possible to pre-overheat modules while under the effect of Jump Cloak. This is the temporary invulnerability and cloak that you have from recently arriving in a new system through a Stargate, Shipcaster, and Celebix or Wormhole. So when you jump into a system, your ship, you can't pre-overheat your micro-warp drive, right? Like, so the best thing to do, you jump into a gate camp, you need to crash gate. One of the things you can do is you can right-click the gate, set destination through it, so that way your autopilot goes through it, and then hit autopilot and micro-warp drive, and then pray as your micro-warp drive, as you rocket towards and jump through it. Now, here's the kicker, though. You want your micro-warp drive to be overheated, but you can't do it afterwards. You kind of have to like start the micro-warp drive as soon as you start moving, even a single second, and the scramble go off, and you want to get at least that one tick of speed before something happens. So you need to be able to pre-overheat the micro-warp drive. You overheat the micro-warp drive, you jump through the gate, that overheat status gets cleared. So this now allows you to overheat a module while you are still in gate cloak, which is a huge deal. I really, really appreciate this change. This is going to be the one that's forgotten from this patch, but it's also like the most impactful change of this patch going forward, in my opinion. Then they also changed the fill color of the corruption bubbles again, and localization and banish. Ship autopilots will now go through jump gates. Damaged laser crystals will no longer be counted as modules for the repair all option of nanite repair paste, which is kind of funny. It is now possible to import fits for the avatar. It's now possible to search for blueprint and officer in the search New Eden bar. These are things I didn't even know were not possible. The quantity field is no longer cuts off in the numbers of charges in the fitting window in simulation mode. Zarzak toll costs are no longer rounded up or down to the 3 significant figures, and now always show the correct cost. Ha, CCP round. The basic shield amplifier now appears in the storyline section of the market. Abyssal mining crystals have a red color icon to match the red beam. Complex mining crystals now have an orange color icon to match their orange beam, and rare moon crystals have a red beam to match their red icon. Regional description of Immensia now uses the correct spelling of Arkanor, and a few UI changes. Nothing seriously jumps out for me, but here you go. All right, and if we go over to HoboLeaks, we can also see that they've changed the text of all of those ships to either add the command burst or the bonuses, or remove the rapid lights. And they changed all of the different damage modifiers of the entropic disintegrators by 20%, which means that, fun fact, all of the entropic disintegrators outside of the Veles and Zoria weapons, by default, their base value reduces the total amount of damage. They have a coefficient that's less than 1. They all used to have a coefficient of at least 1, but now their coefficient has been reduced to 0.88 or above. Just a little funny little side fact. But that's about it. It is a huge amount of updates for us to be getting out of the blue. It makes me very curious as to what else is going to be happening. We also did get an update about the Vanguard playtest that's coming up soon. It is getting to be the end of the month. In February, while I am used to seeing January as a quieter month, February, I'd start thinking about seeing stuff that is supposed to be getting ready for April, or, even the summer expansion as early as now. We haven't had a live arc. I'm curious to see what's going to happen. I'm waiting for signals, because it really seems like the end of last year was the end of the cycle that they had planned for almost 2 years. And now they have retooled for what they are doing next. And we don't really know that much about it, but the CSM seemed pretty excited about it. From my understanding, there was a great update from Darkshines on Reddit about it. Maybe I'll go into that at another time. But for now, that is it for this update. Thank you guys for watching. I have been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden. And until next time, I'll see you in space. Thank you all for watching, and thank you for checking out the video and making it to the end. You guys are very, very important to me. If you haven't already, make sure to like the video and comment below with what is your favorite changes to have happened, or which ones are you most upset at. Are you a long Bellicose fan, or perhaps are you an angry Caracal nerd? It'd be interesting to see how people's feelings about these kinds of changes, especially given the fact that we had very little warning about them, and I wonder whether or not there's going to be more to come. I know that obviously some people would think that I was going to come out with a video that covers some of the stuff from my previous video, but that's coming up. I'm going to talk about all that, but I didn't want to get that in the way of making this video, so here we are. And you'll just have to all wait for that. I do want to thank all my supporters that have been part of this, and of course they got to see this video a day early, and if you want to join them, you can of course do so by just paying $1 a month to become a member, and my eternal gratitude. I'll be sorting all that stuff out more as we get things situated for the channel 2.0. But I hope to see you guys more very, very soon. Make sure to subscribe to the channel to get the most out of my content. But until next time, I've been Ashtarothi, the voice of New Eden, and I will see you in space.